We all should want to be safe in our communities. The problem that we have is that we have an incompetent administration, that everything that they touch turns to shit. Because what they do is they take a wide sweeping brush and they have decided that the enemy is now going to be immigrants instead of taking a scalpel. That's all we're asking, is to be exact in what you're doing instead of taking a sledgehammer to everything.
Donald Trump is not well. We have talked about this again and again on the show, how clearly in cognitive decline he is, but it just became apparent to the people closest to him in a shocking report that we are going to get into. But it doesn't even really seem to scratch the surface of all the health scandals in this administration. There is so much to cover. We are going to get into it all. Before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, there is a lot of health scandals. There are too many almost to count in this administration, and we are going to get into both of those, both Donald Trump and the other member of his administration. But before we do, someone who gave such great context for what is happening right now was Jasmine Crockett in this clip right here.
In the Republican Party, it has to do with things like deleting the history of Jackie Robinson, deleting the history of Harriet Tubman, or deciding that the Tuskegee Airmen should be deleted, or maybe just defunding the African American Museum. The list kind of goes on and on and on, but I am not here to talk about why they are racist. I am here to talk about some other things as it relates to immigration. So let's get to that. You know, it's interesting because we got all these theories. I don't know why we put up with getting data and facts if we just gonna sit here and talk about how we feel. So, you know, maybe we can inject some facts into these feelings. I'm not really sure. But as somebody who has actually practiced criminal defense, I don't know if there's anybody else in here who has. I can tell you that I have handled thousands of cases, not hundreds of cases, thousands on the state level in Texas, Arkansas, and the federal level. And I can tell you that, you know what? If I had to look at the vast majority of the cases that I was representing criminal defendants on, the vast majority of them just didn't happen to be immigrants. These are just the facts of my experience, and maybe the immigrants went to somebody else. I don't know, but I can tell you in my actual experience in real life, in reality, and not in this fallacy world that y'all are making up where you hate on everybody. So my Republican colleagues are here using today to continue pushing this false narrative of sanctuary cities harboring criminals. Yet right here in DC, we have a 34-count felon being harbored in the White House. The hypocrisy coming from your side of the aisle over concerns regarding lawlessness is outrageous. Right now, House Republicans are conducting town halls with constituents lying about our legal system. That, quote, there is no due process if you come here illegally because you violated the law. That immigrants, quote, are not entitled to due process. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. Right now, ICE is trying to work with the IRS because we actually take in billions of dollars because of immigrants in this country, and now they're going to try to get them out. And I'm going to tell you that the biggest issue that we have, I really don't think this should be a partisan issue, so I'm going to agree with my Republican colleagues. I think that we all should want to be safe in our communities. The problem that we have is that we have an incompetent administration, that everything that they touch turns to shit. Because what they do is they take a wide sweeping brush and they have decided that the enemy is now going to be immigrants instead of taking a scalpel. That's all we're asking, is to be exact in what you're doing instead of taking a sledgehammer to everything. Thank you, and I will yield.
It is not just the private health of the president, which is a major concern, which we are about to get into, but it is the public health crisis that he is causing because of who he has put into his administration. And two articles, the first on Donald Trump, the second on RFK Jr., just show how bad it has become because of them. And I want to get into them both. Fund managers quietly fear Trump doesn't have a tariff plan and that he might be insane. Some fund managers concerned that the White House is not acting rationally, but rather on ideology. And some even fear that this may not even be ideology. As Donald Trump's back and forth on trade policies creates chaos in the financial market, some fund managers are questioning his rationality of his decisions. In the last few days, we have had many conversations with macro fund managers. Tom Lee, the head of research at the financial analysis firm FS Insights, wrote, on Wednesday morning before Trump backed down from the most of his tariffs on U.S. trading partners. And their concern is that the White House is not acting rationally, but rather on ideology. And some even fear that this may not even be ideology, he added. A few have quietly wondered if the president might be insane. Lee's comments were highlighted by the New Republic. He blamed Trump for the economic consequences, adding that multiple officials have stated they do not nor expect a recession, and there are enough economy-savvy advisors that they are aware of this. Moreover, the 2 to 3% fiscal stimulus needed to reverse a recession would negate any promised cuts to government spending. And as far as RFK Jr. is confirmed, he is helping to spread measles with his insane rhetoric. Last week, an 8-year-old girl became the second child and the third person to die of measles in the current outbreak. But it was RFK Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who dominated the news cycle. The most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine, Kennedy wrote on X on Sunday afternoon. It was hailed as his strongest endorsement of measles vaccinations yet. But in his next post, a few hours later, Kennedy praised 2 controversial doctors' unproven treatments for measles, making no mention of vaccines. On Thursday, he followed that up by saying on Fox that we need to do better at treating kids who have this disease and not just saying the only answer is vaccination. So we have one person who is just crazy, and we have another person who is a crazy conspiracy theorist dominating the headlines of health scandals in the United States. And Donald Trump just made it worse for himself because he recently took a cognitive test, which I think the results of which should be made public. I actually think that that should be a televised event considering where Donald Trump's mental state is at, so we can get the full read. But this is what he had to say when he was asked about it. When you can't remember your cognitive test, I would say that that is a bad sign for how the cognitive test went. If we're just being honest here, that is not a very positive sign for Donald Trump and his mental state, which we have been rightfully on this show a lot lately, as he just descends into greater madness. But it is, again, not just him causing these problems. We also see RFK Jr. in his advocacy for his anti-vax movement, which is costing children their lives as measles continues to spread. And Rachel Maddow did a great job breaking that all down in this clip right here.
Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have fired 10,000 people from the nation's health agencies in the last couple of weeks. They have cut billions and billions and billions of dollars in health research and health programs. But apparently, somebody forgot to tell Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that that's what he was doing.
You propose more than $11 billion in cuts to local and state programs addressing things like infectious disease, mental health, addiction, and childhood vaccination. Did you personally approve those cuts?
No, I'm not familiar with those cuts. We'd have to go.
There's like more than 50 pages of cuts that I actually went through.
The cuts were mainly DEI cuts, which the president.
There were a lot, but I'll give you, for example, about $750,000 of a University of Michigan grant into adolescent diabetes was cut. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and that's something that we'll look at.
I'm not familiar with those cuts. Those cuts are mainly DEI cuts. We cut infectious disease and mental health and addiction. That sounds like a terrible idea. We cut adolescent diabetes stuff? Well, that's something that we'll look at. I thought these were all DEI cuts. How is it possible you have this job? But while Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claims to know nothing about the massive cuts he has made at the various agencies he runs, or maybe it wasn't him. Hey, if it wasn't you, who did them? One thing he does claim to be very engaged on is the ongoing measles outbreak in West Texas, right? One of the worst measles outbreaks this country has seen in decades. In fact, Kennedy this week personally visited the epicenter of the outbreak. He attended the funeral of an 8-year-old child who's died of measles there, the second kid that this measles outbreak has killed. Kennedy then posted to social media photos of him visiting with the families who lost children to the measles, as well as 2 of the doctors who had been treating them. He called those doctors, quote, extraordinary healers. He claimed they had, quote, treated and healed some 300 measles-stricken children using steroids and an antibiotic. One of those doctors had touted the same steroid as a cure for COVID-19. He said he had realized the steroid's life-saving potential thanks to divine intervention. He discovered that this steroid was a cure for COVID-19. He said, quote, while I was asleep, an answer to prayer came to me. Well, he thinks it cures COVID-19. He now also thinks it cures measles. It's the same medication. I don't know if it was the same dream or whatever. But it's basically an asthma inhaler that he says cures COVID and cures measles. And not to state the obvious, but asthma inhalers do not cure COVID-19 or the measles. Dr. Paul Offit is director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He tells NBC News that, in fact, steroids should not be given early in the course of a viral infection like measles because steroids inhibit the immune system. Quote, that's not what you want to do. Your immune system works for you to fight measles. But I think that inhaled steroids from an asthma inhaler cure COVID and cure the measles. That's one of the 2 doctors our nation's health secretary is endorsing for his miracle working in this out-of-control measles outbreak. The other doctor he's endorsing is a sort of rising star in the anti-vaccine movement who says mass infection with measles, of the kind that we're seeing in this out-of-control outbreak in Texas, is, quote, God's version of measles immunization. From an NBC News report this week, quote, Dr. Ben Edwards, a conventionally trained doctor who has shifted to promoting natural remedies and prayer, has been operating a makeshift clinic in Seminole, Texas, offering children unproven treatments, including, according to a video posted by an anti-vaccine group, quote, while he himself said he was sick with measles. So I know I've just said the word measles a lot, but just focus in on this for a second. What I'm saying here is actually what you think you heard. This is a doctor who advises against the measles vaccine and who is promoting these quack treatments. There is no treatment for measles, right? There's supportive care so that you hopefully don't die from it, but there's no cure for measles. Antibiotics and steroids aren't a cure for measles. But he's saying they're not promoting vaccination.
This administration really just does not care. They are happy to put people's health, their homes, their retirement, savings, all on the line to satisfy the craziest whims of billionaires and conspiracy theorists. That is what it is all about. And we have to call that out. And we are certainly going to on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.